unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Depth, a production of Souls and Liberty. 63 days to go until the election, and the question arising about immigration, particularly Muslim immigration, and its potential impact on the election. Joining us today to talk about what we should be looking for, as well as how things look right now, are Trey Traynor and Stephen Wynn. I'm your host, Gary Michael Voris, coming to you from Houston. Trey, we're going to lead off with you. When we look at what can be appropriately termed a crisis in Europe from Muslim immigration, what do you see or fear unfolding here in the U.S.? And we should
Gary,
quickly add, Trey, very quickly, Trey's a member of the Federal Election Commission, but his answer is based solely on his own private views, which he's entitled to, of course, under the First Amendment. Just wanted to sneak that in there. Trey, you're speaking as a private citizen, not a member of the FEC. Go.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks for having me on. Look, when we look at what's going on in Europe, I mean, we should be terribly afraid for the United States. We see in Europe churches, particularly Catholic churches, which are being targeted and burned, completely gutted, with hundreds of years of history going up in flames, mostly targeted by Muslims attacking those institutions. And it really is speaking to the attack of the broader institution of Western civilization and what's going on. And we see those same things happening here in the United States. You know, I can't help but reflect on the fact that 2 United States Marines were attacked in Turkey, which is supposed to be a NATO ally, and we're supposed to be afforded all sorts of protections when we go there. But the USS Wasp was docked there, and the Marines were given liberty there. And you have 2 U.S. Marines attacked. Just 2 days ago, this happened. So the aggressiveness of Muslims in Europe is problematic. And I think you're starting to see that level of aggressiveness here in the United States when you look at the problems that we see coming out of Colorado with gang influences taking over entire apartment complexes. You see large portions of the country in Minnesota and other places that are being taken over by Muslim influences. And here in the United States, we've always had a deep respect for the freedom of religion, and we allow those people to practice their religion. But once they start to impose through violence their religious beliefs, it is absolutely problematic and something that has to stop, and is only going to stop if we get control of our borders and we control the immigration that's coming into the country so that these people can be kept up with and so that we can monitor their actions while they're here.
Yeah, no, good observations. And Stephen, I want to get your thoughts on what Trey just laid out. And you and I, Stephen, spent obviously a good number of years in Detroit, and the suburb of Dearborn. You can walk around Dearborn and not even know that you're in America. I mean, there's nothing to suggest as you just walk up and down the streets that you're not right smack in the heart of the Middle East. There's a couple of communities like that around the United States. And I guess the problem that Americans have is that, it's one thing to come over, it's another thing to refuse to integrate and assimilate into the culture. But your thoughts on what Trey just said?
Yeah, I agree. There are about 4.5 million Muslims in the United States currently. That's about 1.5% of the population. Compare that with the Muslim population of the UK and France, which is roughly 6 and 10% respectively. So we've got a ways to go before we reach those levels. But there are troubling signs that are emerging. I think, especially in recent years, especially in the last year. You mentioned Dearborn. Just back in April, there was a rally protesting the war in Gaza, and a number of participants just openly started chanting "Death to America." When have you ever heard that before? So I'm sure that the majority of Muslim residents in the U.S. are not, couldn't necessarily be described as extremists, but there's a certain portion of that population that do hold those extremist views, and they are allying themselves with the left, even though they believe practically nothing that the left believes. But they're using that pseudo alliance basically to advance their own power, their own voices. And, for again, in the last few months, we've seen for the first time mass protests, anti-Semitic protests calling for an end to Israel, death to America. And that is unparalleled. We've not seen that in the United States before. And it's very, very troubling.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit of a misnomer to say, well, every group comes over here, the Italians, the Irish, the whole bit, and, they take a generation or two to like completely assimilate and blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, but they didn't hold rallies of thousands of people screaming death to America. I mean, my ancestry is Irish, yours is Scandinavian and, Scottish. And, our ancestors who came over here were not burning American flags and all that. And I think we also have to remember that, it was about a year ago that there was that massive, how is it not an insurrection when you have a group of, hundreds and hundreds of pro-Palestinian, death to America crowd invade the U.S. Capitol and stage a sit-in and scream and cause all kinds of chaos and everything else. I mean, the question of how the elections and the whole electoral scene might be influenced by the importation, and it is an importation by the Biden-Harris administration of illegal immigrants. This stretches back to Obama, actually, who brought over 20 or 30,000, I think it was 30,000 Somalians and Kenyans over here, and then just deposited them in Minnesota, Trey. I mean, this is a problem we're just beginning to see now more frequently, but its roots stretch back, over a decade to Obama.
They do, Gary. And when you look at this situation, you mentioned past immigrant societies that have come to the United States. Those individuals had a strong desire to migrate to the United States based upon what the United States believes in. Right. They believe in individual liberty and individual freedom, and they wanted to be a part of that community. What we see today are individuals who are coming into the United States as a place to occupy, as a place to live, and to reestablish their own belief systems here. Not to adopt the belief systems of the country that they're not migrants to this country. They don't come here with an interest in being part of the country. They come here with an interest of either reestablishing their country or establishing something apart from that, but closely aligned with it. And so they're not coming here as free immigrant societies. And that's why it's so important that we get control of our southern border to make sure that people are being vetted, that we know who's coming in and what the intentions of those individuals coming in are. I look at the current debate amongst the presidential candidates about what's happening with the southern border, and you really have a dichotomy that one says that we're not getting the best and brightest from the other countries in the world, and I think that's the case. I think we're getting the criminal elements, and we have another that's saying, no, these are just like every other immigrant population, but we haven't seen anything to bear out that these are like other immigrant populations, whether it be the Germans, the Irish, the Polish, whoever it may be that came to this country at one particular time. They came here in search of freedom, in search of the liberty that the United States offers. These individuals are not coming here in search of the liberty that the United States offers. In fact, they're coming here to badger the United States and use the liberties that the United States offers as a mechanism, as a weapon to do that.
Yeah, I think it's very disturbing when you look around. I'm a first generation American. My mom came over here as Irish heritage, but English nationality. And it was interesting when I think about what I hear and see now. I was present in San Francisco when my mom took the oath of office, the oath of citizenship. And we got in the car, drove back to where we lived in Northern California. And my mom said to me, "Oh, I'm an American now. Oh, I love America." And it was with her English accent. So it was kind of a whole different sense of what you see now with the immigrant wave. And the only thing they have in common is they're not from this country. And that's about where the similarity ends.
Gary, they're not even part of the system that would allow us to have that level of education about what it means to be an American. And you're right. When people go through the normal process, the normal legal process of becoming a United States citizen, there is an extensive test. There's time that they have to study. They have to understand the Constitution. They have to understand the Declaration of Independence. One of the things that I think scares them the most is that they have to learn the words to the Star-Spangled Banner. When you have illegal immigrants coming into the country and completely sidestepping the entire legal system, there's not that level of education that goes on. So we don't even have an opportunity to make them part of the United States because they are completely stepping around the legal rigors that are in place to protect both this country and frankly, to protect them so that we know where they're at, because we know that it's the immigrant populations that are being preyed upon. And that's where we see the gang influences that have happened around the country.
Yeah. No, I mean, I helped my mom study for those tests. Those there was a little like almost not comic book, but that type of pamphlet, little booklet that you had to go over and go the questions. And Mom, how many U.S. congressmen are there? How many U.S. senators? What are the rights of the First Amendment? I went over all of that stuff with her, studying for. We were cramming on the way down to San Francisco to the federal courthouse, where she met whoever the guy was that she had to take the test with. So you're right. There is. I'd actually not thought of that until you said that. The normal, I hadn't remembered that I'd done all that with my mom until you just said that. I was like, oh, yeah, wait a minute, that's true. Stephen, I have a rudimentary question here. Theologically, what's the danger posed by Islam, that whatever portion that is of immigrants, illegal immigrants being brought into the country, into a Western Christian civilization? Theologically, what's the issue? And just before we're going to leave that floating around in your head for a moment, just before we get to your answer, just want to let you all know, if you like and support what we are saying here and producing all the time at Souls and Liberty, please feel free to just click on that donate button and help support us. You can be a monthly contributor. You can send a one-time donation. If you'd like to be a person who's part of the founding membership of what we're doing here as far as financial support, that of course is welcome as well. But please consider, if you're already giving, thank you very much. Please continue. If you haven't given or you haven't really thought about it before, please consider that now. But thank you very much for whatever your response is. Stephen, question. You're up.
Well, at its most basic level, I think the theological problem is that it's false. It's a false faith, a false religion, and it's being propagated more and more in this country. In Europe, there's actually been a slew of conversions among native Britons, native Frenchmen who have not been properly catechized, evangelized. They just grew up with this milquetoast Christianity, various, very tenuous connections to the faith of their fathers. And so they don't see it, being lived out. They think it's just a very sort of weak faith as they see it, playing out in everyday society. And they're right, really. And so a lot of them have been very attracted to the rigidity, the strength with which Islam, is portrayed, with which it's subscribed to by a lot of Muslims. I think that's kind of a big problem, is that many Muslims take their faith much more seriously than Christians do, and as a result, it can prove attractive to a lot of disaffected young people, especially disaffected young men. And I think that Islam there is no magisterium in Islam, so there's not like a sort of a single sort of codified system of beliefs of how to interpret the Quran and other related texts. And so as a result, you have widely varying interpretations of their holy writings and what they regard as the holy writings.
I was just going to say purported to be holy.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for that qualifier there. But so you can have a number of people who a large portion who interpret them in a more moderate sense, but then you have the extremists who take read it quite literally, and as a result, you end up with things like 9/11, the Boston Marathon bombing, etc. And as we have seen in the past couple of decades, it just takes a handful of people like that who are absolutely fundamentally committed to their faith in that sense, to absolutely undermine our system of government, our society, and they really present a grave threat to the United States in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, many people probably don't realize that there's a major distinction or rift, I suppose, within Islam, and there's the Sunni Muslims and the Shiite Muslims. And in the Christian world, if you thought Catholic and Protestant was a thing, you ain't seen nothing yet. I mean, they hate each other's guts, the Sunnis and the Shiites. They'll unite against, the great Satan of America and all of that. But I mean, those two groups, that's the big war between Iran and Iraq, the big disagreement there. So what you see happening in Europe, Trey, when I come back with you, is really an attempt to destabilize ultimately Christianity. I mean, yes, there's a political system obviously attached with Islam. It is a theocracy. I don't know if you put the government first or the religion first, but however you would arrange that, this is ultimately aimed at the overthrow of Christianity and namely Catholicism.
Without question, it is. And, I reflect upon the activities that have happened in Israel and the war taking place against Hamas there. Here you have the United States and you have Western nations trying to broker a peace deal. They offer peace solutions, all of which have as a tenet in them the return of the hostages that were taken in October 7th, and we're quickly approaching a one-year anniversary of that. But all of them had as a tenet of that the hostages had to be returned. And the Israelis have constantly agreed to all of those terms. And yet you have the radical Muslims of Hamas being propped up by Iran, who are non-negotiable. And they've gotten to the point now where they kill 6 hostages in cold blood to take the hostages off the table as a negotiating element. I mean, all they want to negotiate is the end of Israel. And to your point, it is really what they want to negotiate is the end of Western civilization and ultimately the end of the Catholic Church as the ultimate godhead of what goes on in Western civilization and frankly what goes on in this world that we know. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of the day, it is this constant attack that's going on. And this is nothing new. The ability of the West to live with Islam has existed. Inability to live with Islam has existed for a long time. I mean, you look back at the establishment of the Eastern Roman Empire in Constantinople. They welcomed in Muslims into that society, but ultimately the Muslims overthrew Constantinople. And in doing so, there were even some, moderate political elements who said, no, let's keep these Christians around. They know how to make they know how to make the trains run on time. They know how to generate revenue. They know how to engage in commerce. And the radicals within the Islamic State after the overthrow of Constantinople said, no, we're going to get rid of all of these people. And they started beheading people, enslaving people, doing all of those things. And it's continued forward to this day, which leads me back to what I led with. I mean, we have 2 U.S. Marines being attacked in Turkey today. So, I mean, we've come full circle in all of that to say that it's still this constant fight against the church and against Western civilization that can't be undone.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have a group. It doesn't matter if the group is 2%, 5%, 20, half. It doesn't matter. You've got this radicalized group who don't see themselves as radicalized. They see themselves as the group that needs to, whip up the other troops who are a little bit more, we can live in peace. There's a core in there that simply could not be described as the religion of peace supporters. They wouldn't support that label. Not until the West is completely conquered, then they can be all peaceful because there's no enemies left.
Well, Gary, if you look back in the history of the United States, I mean, the reason, as a Catholic, I'm very sensitive to attacking people based upon religious understanding. And so, we've had parties in the United States. The Know Nothing Party was very anti-Catholic. But the thing that allowed the Know Nothings to be defeated and for it to be recognized that it was wrong to be biased against Catholics was that the Catholics still had a basic understanding of Christian moral principles, that they agreed with the tenets of Western civilization, that they wanted to participate in the greatness that is the United States. They wanted freedom. They wanted freedom of religion for everyone. In fact, Catholics have been some of the most tolerant. I mean, if you go to Utah, there are huge cathedrals that are paid for by Mormons because of the benefits that they received from Catholics in their persecution. And so, at the end of the day, we have to be very careful about labeling people based upon their religion, but we also have to understand that there has to be some saving grace in that religious belief in order for us to continue to be able to tolerate it.
Yeah, exactly. If you've got, the Catholics didn't come over and say, let's destroy America. That's what they were accused of. And that was the early days of not early days, but the 1920s of the KKK and the Know Nothing Party, as you mentioned, stuff, which was about 100 years ago. I mean, Notre Dame football, sorry to bring it up, Trey, Notre Dame football is wrapped up in Texas. Everybody gets the inside joke there. Trey went to Texas A&M and Notre Dame went down to Texas A&M this weekend, and we'll leave it at there, Trey. I know it's a sore spot. Right. But part of Notre Dame football lore was beholding precisely to the fact that the KKK marched on Notre Dame in the spring of 1924, meaning to burn it down. Tens of thousands marched, and the students and the football team went out there and kind of, had this like melee in the streets and the whole bit. So yeah, there's been but the idea that, Notre Dame starts off every single game, as all schools do, but Notre Dame was one of the first to start off by hoisting up the American flag, hoisting up the American flag and singing America the Beautiful and the Star Spangled Banner, to sort of assert, we believe in these principles. We're here. We believe it. We're here because of these principles. Stephen, I'm going to switch over to you. That just give us your closing thoughts on all of this, because you always have this kind of good historical view of overview of things, and I think it's important the audience hear what you've got to say.
Well, it's interesting. I think that I think the threat posed by radical Islam in this country is growing. And what's concerning to me in particular is the way that that the more radical elements among the Muslim faith have been able to ally themselves with the woke left, specifically the Marxist media. We're coming upon the 23rd anniversary of 9/11. It'll be in a few days, and if you go back and look at just read articles that were written in the wake of that, they were, even from liberal publications, they were very sober, not just because of the death count, but there was no pandering to Islam, to Muslim people of the Muslim faith, extremists, etc. You will notice a stark difference in tone between the reporting 23 years ago and that of today. It's just remarkable, the difference. And so just as leftist media outlets are functioning as propaganda mouthpieces for everything woke, everything that pertaining to the left. They're also doing that with kind of creating a protected class, I guess you could say, in regards to Islam and the followers of the faith. And I just think that is very dangerous. We can see how they warp the narrative, they warp the sort of the collective conscience of the United States for those who don't read further, who are just spoon fed their news by CNN and the New York Times and whatnot. And so I think that that also is a threat, just out and out deception, basically. So I don't know. It's a concern.
Yeah, it's a deep concern. Trey, your final thoughts on this?
Well, my final thought is this. The United States has to get control of what's going on at the southern border. We have to protect against the things that are happening in Europe. And the only way to do that is to get control of our immigration. Right now, we have millions of individuals that are unaccounted for in the country. We have no way to put them even into a system to categorize them, to know who is and isn't a threat. We're starting to see major criminal elements. We're not talking about one-offs of, one or two criminals who've made it into the country and committing random acts, which is what this was originally thought to be. I mean, you see the attacks in New York City and Central Park and places like that. Okay, one bad apple got through, but now we see entire gang organizations. We see entire operations being set up in the country where people are being moved freely across the border, both in human trafficking sense and in the sense of bringing in more soldiers into a gang army to help supplant what's going on here in the United States. And you see these micro takeovers of whether it be cities like Dearborn, places in Minnesota, what's happening in Colorado. You see all of these things starting to happen. And the next thing we're going to see is Catholic churches ablaze across the country like they have seen in Europe. And you're going to see this slow takeover of the United States using our own rules, our own laws against us because they've chosen to violate the law in the first place.
And they have a party that is happy to let them violate them. Was it the old saying that, some people are so wicked, some rulers are so wicked that they will burn their empire to the ground so that they can rule over the ashes of it. Man, thanks for coming on. Good contributions, as always.
Thank you, Gary.
Food for thought. Thank you, guys. As we leave you today, a quick thought. It's the children that Democrats and their policies threaten, abortion being just the most obvious starting point. But it's not abortion alone, because despite their best efforts, still 2 out of every 3 children conceived does, in fact, escape the abortionist's knife. Quick sidebar, that means 1 out of every 3 is murdered in the womb. That's horrific. The Dems, communists, hate children. They hate them because they represent hope, the future, and innocence, things communists detest. Communism is built on fear and control, tyranny, in short. Fear precludes hope. You can't have hope if you live in a perpetual state of fear. So hope becomes the enemy of fear. They cannot coexist, not on a foundational level. The future is also something communists don't want concentrated on, despite the clarion call by Karl Marx, echoed by Kamala Harris, of what we can be, unburdened by what has been. All that is, the only thing it points to is a rejection of the past. Traditions, what got us to where we are now, all the great learning and so forth, so that a different future, unmoored from anything of the past, may come to be. And when that future comes into existence, it will be the present forever. There is no future with communists, just a different present. And when it comes to innocence, this may be the one human dynamic that communists despise the most. Innocence encapsulates the future and hope. Without innocence, despair sets in. When innocence is robbed from a child, darkness replaces it. Fear becomes the companion of a child, not hope, not the future. Expressing all of this is precisely why communists hate free speech and they want it censored. Since the devil is their father, he knows the playing field isn't really even. God created humanity in original innocence, and even though that has been marred by sin, it hasn't gone away. It's most especially evident in, for example, a small child, and is reflected in the face of an adult looking at the child. There is a moment of innocence shared between the truly innocent, the child, and the desire for innocence, sort of revigored again, re-enlivened in the adult. This is why communists seek to destroy innocence, because their father, the devil, opposes it, precisely because it points to our spiritual natures, which longingly hope for a better future. God love you. I'm Gary Michael Voris.